Well, hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Global Missions Podcast. We are recording this in May of 2025, and I just want to share with you a bit of a celebration that we're having as a team. Our first episode, 001, dropped on May 25th, 2015. That means that we have now completed 10 years in this program, and we just delight in God's faithfulness. We've learned so much. So many guests have contributed. We've had an amazing team. Thanks for those that have been patient over the last year or so. We have had some gaps in there, but there are over 200 unique episodes of the Global Missions Podcast. And we just thank the Lord as we're celebrating 10 years. Happy birthday, GMP. If this is the first time you're listening, or maybe you've been listening for many of those 10 years, we want to invite you to subscribe. This is the best way to make sure that you won't miss any episodes, and we'd appreciate it if you'd mention it to others that you think would benefit from this program. You can also follow us on YouTube and on Instagram, join the community there, and get in the conversation as we try and lift this from being just an outward projection of a podcast, a broadcast, if you will, but we want to engage in a conversation with you. This is our third episode in a short mini-series on short-term missions. Now, it's late spring for this recording. If you're listening to it near the time of recording, many of you will be thinking about, preparing for, supporting, or praying for short-term missions. And so we want to be right in that space. This is a great conversation with Johnny today. It's the first time I've met Johnny, and I've appreciated his heart to help people prepare for short-term mission and to do it really well. We're going to zoom in on the conversation about evangelism and how do we ensure that whatever we do through short-term missions, it includes the proclamation of the gospel. So we want to keep fostering long-term discipleship through short-term missions. We've entitled this episode, Preparing Short-Term Goers for Proclamation. Hello, friends. Our guest today is Johnny Peebles, who is joining me from Germany, actually. He, together with his wife, Megan, serve with Greater Europe Mission, and they live in Kandern. They are both Americans, and the Lord has taken them to Europe. They met in Europe. Maybe we'll hear just a little bit about that in a second, Johnny. I want to mention that Johnny serves with GEM Teams, Greater Europe Mission, and he'll share a little bit about that as well. Johnny, welcome to the Global Missions Podcast.
Thank you very much. It's really fun to be here.
We are looking forward to talking today about proclamation, evangelism of sharing the gospel through short-term missions. Just before we get to that, let's set a bit of context, Johnny. Who are you and what's your role with GEM and how does this fit with short-term missions?
Yeah, so my wife Megan and I have been with GEM Teams in Germany for the past 5 years. We got here at the end of 2020, and it's a ministry of discipling and leading short-term teams across Europe. So we collaborate with ministry sites, European ministry sites, and teams of volunteers to minister in the ways that are most needed. So whether that's through refugee ministry or a construction project or evangelism or something else entirely.
We want to say at the outset here, we really believe in Christian actions and serving in visible ways and the proclamation of the gospel, and those need to be woven together. I think we'll hear that in some of Johnny's stories and testimony to us today. Johnny, GEM Teams uses a phrase that we really love. This is it, discipleship in service. What do you mean by that? Just unpack that a bit for us.
Discipleship and service are two words that sum up our vision for ministry as GEM Teams. So we intentionally disciple our teams of volunteers through reading the Bible together every day, hearing the Lord speak to us through his word. That's probably the main way that we do it. The scriptures are living and active, and I know of no clearer way that God changes hearts than through us engaging with his word. Not only that, we pray together, we pray for each other, we debrief every day on what we're learning, how we see God at work, and of course we serve together too. So we come alongside the European ministries to meet the needs that they express to us. And it's for their benefit and their encouragement as they proclaim the gospel and make disciples too. So that's how those two words, discipleship and service, fit together.
They fit together. I know that part of your heart is to weave together the particular context where the ministry will take place and the people who come. You're matching it so that it's kind of tailored together. That's part of your ministry there. I've heard about one of the teams that you have led in the Netherlands. Evangelism is a major focus there. I wonder if you'd share a little bit about how that trip works.
Yeah, of course. So that is a team that we lead to Alkmaar, Netherlands. It's a city about 30 minutes north of Amsterdam, so the northern part of the Netherlands. It's about 125,000 people, and very few of them are believers. It's about 2% of them. And so local believers, a number of years ago, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, got together and said, we're not getting any younger. How can we use the time that we have to evangelize our city? And so they started an initiative called Power to Change. That's the English name. It's hard to say in Dutch. But the local believers go out to these outdoor shopping areas or to markets that are happening in various towns, and they talk to people about Jesus. And they've created a website, Power to Change, that has testimonies of how Jesus has the power to change lives. And as they're talking with people, they'll often direct them to that website to kind of explore further on their own. And on that website, they can get in contact with Christians who are in the area, which I think is such an important piece. So it's not just a one-touch ministry, but there's multiple times when they can come in contact with believers. And so when we host short-term teams, that allows them to have more focused and extensive times of evangelism than they can just have on their own. So on their own, with just their core team, they might be able to go out like as a large group a couple of times a month. But when we have a team, we can be there for 1 to 2 weeks, going every day and just sharing with more people. One of the ways that we start conversations with people, if you want to know how this works, is they actually have a survey. And I've in the past, many years ago, I've been in a situation where there was a survey, but it wasn't a real survey. It was just kind of a way to get to talk to people. This is actually a real survey with collected results. And the question that's asked, it's only one question. It's, what do people need the most? And there are different answers that you can select from on this paper that they have. You can choose love or peace or forgiveness. They can even choose their own. And when people actually say, yeah, I'll take the survey, and they choose one, the answer they choose usually reflects what they need the most. And this opens the conversation to how Jesus has met that need in your own life. How have you found forgiveness in Jesus? How have you found love in Jesus? How have you found hope? And so that's one of the main ways that we kind of begin conversations with people. And then oftentimes the conversations go really well and can be quite extensive. And when you have those kinds of conversations, we have Bibles that they can give out in various languages so that people can continue on that journey at their own time. So like many, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I'm just going to pile on in a minute. Finish your thought. We'll come back to it.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I was thinking about the Netherlands. One of the local ladies there, it was at the end of the week we were there with the team. She said, "Thank you for coming to plow the hard ground of the Netherlands." And I think that is true of many places in Europe. There's, in the Netherlands, certainly a resistance and even a disdain for the gospel. But you would be really amazed at how many people have no idea who Jesus really is. And it's a great privilege to be able to go, to be invited to partner with that ministry and to just sow the seeds of the gospel in a dark place.
We talk a fair amount on our program about short-term missions. That won't surprise you, Johnny. So many of our listeners are familiar with the basic ideas. As I listened to you share that story of just one location, there were so many healthy things I heard. Let me just scan over some of the things I jotted down. Johnny and the team demonstrate significant familiarity with where they're going. You heard him say not only where it was, the population that was there, the context that was there. So there's familiarity with where the team is going to. I love that there was a digital start. It sounded to me like the online website creates a place where there's some online opportunity. We're blending online digital stuff with in-person physical presence, and those coming together, amazing. You used a survey. It's interesting the way you described the survey, Johnny, because you said it's legit. It's not like a fake, make it up sort of thing. And that survey, of course, is designed. It can be designed to be very intentionally opening those conversations to deep needs. And then it went by quite quickly, but you also, when possible, leave something tangible, scripture or other pieces of literature with someone. Folks, when you meet them for the first time, they won't always receive something tangible. We get that. But if they're open to it, leaving something tangible with them, these are just a few of the things that Johnny mentioned there. Really healthy elements to short-term missions. Johnny, I want to ask about how you weave together the readying of a team to come there. Let's say you have a team coming from Canada, for example, where I am this morning. They're going to come and join you for that team. How would you help prepare them in advance of their arrival in the Netherlands?
Yeah, so if I were leading a team, and we have lots of communication before the time of ministry actually begins, there's a few things that I would try to help them to set up their expectations well, because expectations are such a vital thing for short-term teams. And if you kind of get derailed on your expectations, it can be really hard to get back on track, to continue the train analogy. But so if I think about what I'm trying to set up the expectations to be, one of them would be to be ministry site focused. It's one of our values as gym teams is to be ministry site focused. And what I mean by that is, if we're bringing a short-term team, we're going to collaborate with that ministry site to find out what the real needs are. What sort of work needs to be done? What sort of team would be the most helpful for them? What time of year it's going to be best for them? How many volunteers do they need? All these are considerations that we make before we even actually go to who is coming on the team. So we keep that in mind, because the last thing we want to do is to show up with too many people at the wrong time of year doing the wrong kind of ministry that doesn't make sense for the context. And I mean, God can still use that if we don't get it right, but we can be wise and thoughtful about it too. So to keep in mind why we're there is to be of use to the ministry site that we're going to serve. Flexibility takes a lot of flexibility to be ministry site focused, because sometimes you do everything right. You plan with the ministry site to the best of your ability, and then you arrive to find that the needs have changed, that something has happened, and a new plan needs to be made. And we want to encourage our team to think, how will you respond to that when there's a change, when it didn't go how you expected it to? Often there's a team leader coming with the group. I can express to them, how can you model that flexibility to the team? How can we together model that flexibility? So depending on where that team is going, changes like that are more or less likely. Where I live in Germany, it's unlikely that the plan is going to change. It's usually, we stick to the plan usually here in Germany. But in 3 weeks, I'm leading a team to Athens, Greece, and it's much more likely that the plan will change there. It comes together later, and it's often different once you arrive. So you got to know your context too. So I would try to encourage the volunteers to keep that in mind. And then in all of that, you just have to be humble. It requires a great deal of humility to be flexible and to put the needs of the ministry site first. So my coworker, Matt, once said that the best way to make it a great experience for the volunteer is to not make the experience about the volunteer. And so what he meant by that is not that there are not lessons to be learned. And he didn't mean that it's not going to be fun, because these ministry projects are fun many times. But he means to take the opportunity to become a vessel used by God for the work at hand. So those are some of the expectations we try to instill in the team, help them prepare beforehand to be site-focused, flexible, and humble. And if you do that, then you're in a great place. You're at a great start from there.
It's great foundations are laid, right? It's a super list of ways that we can be thoughtfully preparing, like you said, based on the preparation that you've done on the field to discern the context, but to have hearts ready to come into that context and to serve. You've talked about street evangelism, Johnny, and in some places that can be a great way to do ministry. I wonder, I don't want to generalize, but maybe the outdoor evenings in Europe, some of the places I've been, there's lots of foot traffic, so to speak, out on the evenings, and it may fit really well. It may not always be the right fit. How do you discern when it's a good fit and when it's not a good fit?
Yeah, you're right. The reason we do street evangelism in the Netherlands is because the ministry site directs us to do that in the Netherlands. It makes sense. It's an acceptable thing to do there. But it's not always an acceptable thing to do. So to contrast the two experiences, there's this amazing couple in Spain who have a ministry on the Camino de Santiago. If you don't know the Camino de Santiago, if the listener doesn't know, it's this 800-kilometer historically Catholic pilgrimage in Spain that today most of the people who walk it are not Catholic, and they come from all over the world. Many of them are searching for meaning, searching for hope. Maybe they're grieving a loss of something, a loss of some kind. And so you'll find that the pilgrims, the kind of culture that is found along the Camino, is very open. So pilgrims are open to sharing about their own story almost immediately, in a way that I've never experienced anywhere else. You can be talking with someone for a couple of minutes and they'll say, yeah, my dad passed away and I've just been having a really hard time, so I wanted to take this Camino to find some hope again. And so it's something I've never experienced anywhere else. One of my favorite ministry times in the last 5 years of leading teams was with the pilgrim on the Camino. But that's with the pilgrims. You can be really open, immediately sharing the gospel with pilgrims, and they're open to hearing. But ministry to the local Spanish people is far different. It's definitely a long-term game there. So if you went out to try to evangelize in the same way that we do in the Netherlands, because it's a historically Catholic country and we're not Catholics, we would be considered fanatics or part of a sect, and it basically just shut out and not talked to. So you really need to know the context that you're entering into. The pilgrims and the Spanish people, they're two contexts, they're right beside each other, but you need to be very aware of how you minister. And this couple that I talked about who have this ministry, I've seen them be able to just switch on a dime with what they're doing. It's quite incredible to see how sensitive they've become to the two contexts that they live within. So ministry site knowledge is really key. Get to know the ministry site if you don't know them, and the teams will be in a good spot to know what to do.
What a great example. Like you said, geographically not that far apart, the places you're talking about, but the awareness. So it's not even about geography. It's about being aware of just where people are at and how they are responsive to these types of conversations or not. And the flexibility to switch between them. The other thing, again, I'm just piling on the great principles that Jem is using here. You can see the interaction between long-term servants and short-term servants. And those long-term servants are able to help provide the context. And so if you as a church are planning to do short-term work, can you link very deliberately with faithful long-term servants, whether it's local Christians or it's a missionary team that is already serving there and can help provide that? It's likely to bear good fruit. Well, we're going to continue this conversation with Johnny. Just amazing to go to Europe together with you, Johnny. We're going to take a short break, and the resource we're going to mention today again is the GoJournal. Many of you on this program have heard about the GoJournal. but I just want to highlight it myself even because it's a resource that is for short-term teams. If you or your church are thinking about doing a short-term team, it's a resource that will help you in the pre-field planning phase and getting the cultural and contextual understanding that Johnny has mentioned before you go anywhere. It has a large section for ongoing reflection every day that you're on the field, either as an individual or as a team, and then when you come back, unpacking it. So here's a little bit about the GoJournal. We hope it'll be helpful to you and your church as you serve in short-term missions. Okay, we are back with Johnny Peebles, who serves with GEM teams, Greater Europe Mission teams, and he's helping us think through short-term missions, especially as related to proclamation and evangelism. Johnny, you use a diagram that will describe a little bit for those who are just hearing this, and it has to do with the goals, the heart of street evangelism. Let's take a few minutes and describe that, and just why do you like to use this particular model to think through street evangelism?
So I first heard about this scale. It's called the Engel scale from the ministry site in the Netherlands. I was unfamiliar with it before then, but I found it to be really helpful in thinking about what evangelism is all about. So if you can imagine a scale that is almost like a staircase going upward. On the bottom left, you'll see the lower numbers, and then as you go up, there's just ascending numbers. So at the very bottom, number one would be someone who has no awareness of God, or maybe they don't even have contact with Christians. And then as you ascend the scale, there comes a point where people are investigating Jesus, grasping the truth about Jesus, and then a moment where they surrender themselves to Christ. And then beyond that, there's different aspects of Christian growth and maturity. And when we're evangelizing, this is a helpful scale to keep in mind, because no matter what the context is, whether it's the Netherlands, Spain, Canada, anywhere, you don't know where people are on that scale. So some people may be exploring Jesus. Some people may have never actually really even heard about Jesus. They've only heard the name, never heard the gospel story before. And it's helpful to know this because when we go out to evangelize, our main purpose is to be faithful in proclaiming the gospel and allowing God to be the one who, by his Spirit, is at work in people to draw them to himself. And so I found this to be a really helpful scale when it comes to giving a little bit of instruction to teams about evangelizing.
Well, it seems to make a lot of sense that in a journey to understand who Jesus is and to consider his claims and his offer and to come to Christ is a journey, and it would be unwise for us to think that everybody that we would talk to is at the same place in that journey. I also like the model of advancing there. Sometimes we've talked about even links in a chain, how many links there are and how many conversations the Lord typically will use to ignite an awareness and to lead to understanding and then lead to receptivity of the gospel. Similar idea. So how do you use this? How do you use it in preparing a team prior to arriving in a ministry context?
So back to that aspect of faithfulness, we are there to faithfully proclaim the gospel, sow the seeds of the gospel through conversation, through our actions, through the way that we're treating people. And with this scale, you have to sometimes fight against your natural tendency to want to see results and to be okay with that. It's not a not Christian and then converted to a Christian scale. That's a little too simplified. There's all these steps and links in the chain before then. And so with this, you can learn to better trust that your obedience in sharing Christ is a good and pleasing thing to God. And you can, in a sense, let go or allow God to be the one responsible for the results. Jesus says, no one comes to me unless the Father draws him to me. So sometimes you do on a team, sometimes you do see people come to Christ. That's an amazing thing. That's a great privilege to be able to see that. Other times you just get to be the only witness to Christ that someone will encounter that month. You really just never know, because we're so blind to where people actually are in their relationship to the Lord that our call is just to be faithful.
That's so good. So healthy, I think, too. Resonates deeply the idea that there is fruit along the way. We've heard some teams, of course, and it may have to do with our focus here in North America on metrics and results. We want to see things happen, right? And often the simplistic result is one you've mentioned. Well, how many people made a profession of faith, or however that's described. What you're saying is there are all kinds of good fruits in inviting people to go maybe from step 0 to 1 or 1 to 2, which is prior to even a conversation directly about the cross.
Yeah. Can I share one little story along that line?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So last year in the Netherlands, we were out around the shopping center, sharing with people, and two people who were out together. They were kind of standing off to the side somewhere, and a little distance away, they saw this young guy running in their general direction, and they were talking to each other. And they said, "Oh, look, that guy's running to hear the gospel. He was coming in their direction." And to their surprise, he actually did come up to them, and he said, "Are you guys the evangelists?" And they said, "Well, yeah, we are evangelizing." And they said, "Can you teach me how to evangelize?" And he was a young believer. He had just been baptized maybe a week before, and had found out about this ministry and wanted to come and learn to evangelize with them. And so that was someone who was on the other side of that surrendering to Christ scale. And you just never know. You never know what sort of an impact that the Lord can have through you when you're out there.
That's really encouraging. We will include this scale in the show notes as well, so that if you'd like to have a look at it, you can download it and print it as a PDF. I can imagine that some folks are nervous about this, imagining from our context going to your context. How do you help people who are maybe not used to publicly professing or engaging in street evangelism, for example? How do you help them address, I'm nervous about this?
I totally understand that. Yeah, I really understand that. And we always go out in pairs. I think that's a helpful thing. It's not just a helpful thing, but it's a safety thing. It's just always good to go out in pairs. So if there was someone who was feeling nervous, I would definitely pair them up with someone who's a little bit more experienced, maybe a little bolder. And I would also encourage them that having a quieter personality, or not being an outgoing person, can actually be a strength in these situations. Like a couple of years ago, in the Netherlands, again, I'll just keep sharing stories about there, since that was a big evangelism team. There was a man who came to Alkmaar, and he was from Texas, and he was just this really quiet, gentle soul, and he had never done any kind of street evangelism before, and he was nervous about it too. But God used him in a really amazing way that week. We were in different small towns around the Alkmaar, and we gathered to pray before we actually go out in pairs. And we were about to pray, and we looked around. We said, "Wait, where's Larry?" We were looking for him, and there he was. He was sitting on a park bench with someone, just naturally talking with them. And this happened on a whole bunch of different occasions that week, that we would be out, and he was just talking to someone for like over an hour, sharing the gospel with them, praying for them. And he wasn't a loud street preacher, but God used him and his personality to shine a lot of light, to share a lot of truth that week. And I think actually someone who was bold enough to be a loud street preacher would have just been ignored in that context. So God used him in a way that I think he didn't expect. And that was really encouraging to everyone else on the team.
I hope it's encouraging to our listeners as well, Johnny, that you may not think of yourself as having a personality that's on the street preaching, that old kind of image we have of standing on a box. There may be value in doing that in some contexts, I understand, but maybe that's not for you, and yet you see how the Lord uses authentic, genuine, caring conversations to help move people along this scale that Johnny has talked about. And perhaps there is more opportunity than you initially thought for the Lord to use your particular type of personality and what interests you have in proclaiming the good news of the gospel. That's great. Well, thank the Lord for Larry, right, Johnny?
Yeah, love Larry.
I wonder if you would tip toward leaders, team leaders, for just a moment. We have these dear people. Thank you, by the way, if you are helping to lead a short-term mission team and gather together and build unity amongst a group of people. What advice, Johnny, do you have for leaders who want to make the most of these discipleship opportunities, pre-field, on-field, post-field?
One of the main ways is through having daily debriefs with the team. I found them to be really helpful. Perhaps at dinner time, after dinner, we'd say, what happened today? Like, what did we do today? What was a highlight or a low light from the day? And consistently bringing it back to why we are here. Often during these times, like I've said, the Word of God speaks. Often something that was discussed during the devotion in the morning will be highlighted in something that was going on during the day, just about how it informed someone to be able to love someone in a way that they maybe would have been afraid to do in the past. So those daily debriefs are really helpful. And something that I like to do with teams is actually the very last meal that we share. So this is just kind of a momentary thing. It's right at the end of a team. When we're sharing the meal, I call it the appreciation dinner. So the whole team is there. Maybe a few of the local ministers will be there too, if they can make it. And at dinner, we go around the table, and for each person, so let's say we have Mags over here, I would ask 2 or 3 people to share about how they saw God at work in Mags or through Mags. And it's an encouraging time for everyone, because many times we see God at work in other people more than we do in ourselves, or more than other people can see in themselves. And so to be able to take just a little bit of time, usually takes half an hour as we're going around the table, to share about things, it can really be an encouraging time, an upbuilding time, and is also a helpful way to reflect on the experience that people have had during the week. So we don't want to make the experience about the volunteer, like we said, but the experience certainly has an effect and can have a really positive effect on the volunteer.
That's super. We often talk about long-term fruit from short-term ministry events here. Maybe as we get ready to wrap up here, how do you encourage that going forward? We don't want it just to be about the 2 weeks spent in the Netherlands, but we want there to be lasting fruit. How do you seek to encourage the team members as they head home with this same scale?
I would encourage them to consider their context. Like when they think of the ways that they were able to serve on the mission field, can they even dream of being able to do similar things at home? Do they live in a community where you're able to share freely with people? Or does it take a long time to build relationships that can go beyond the surface? So consider your context. More often than not, it is the long game. It's a long obedience in the same direction, as someone said. And so I would encourage them to consider the context that they're in. And then maybe just take a chance. Like, could what we did in the Netherlands work in Canada? Could we reach out to people in the same way? And just to ask God to give them clear direction and a boldness to follow through on that. I think that would be my main encouragement. Think about where you're from and how could God use you there in the ways that he used you on the mission field.
We really hope that will be true, that as you think through short-term missions at your church, that it's not only about that relatively short season of time and opportunity in some context, maybe in Europe, but that it will bear lasting fruit and that we will be proclaimers. I'm going to ask Johnny my closing question, and many of our listeners know what that means already, Johnny, but I just want to add a word of encouragement to those of you who are going to be senders here. We've talked a lot about the goer and preparing the expectations of the goer, but I just appreciate your listening in as senders and praying into these things. Sometimes we hope that there will be fruit coming home from these trips. We talked about those metrics before. Maybe the questions we need to ask and the expectations we need to have as the senders also need to be reviewed, and that it's not just a report of how many made a profession of faith in response to the team that we sent, but what are the other stepping stones in the scale that we can celebrate. And even as you help receive home these teams and debrief with them, ask them about these stepping stones along the way. Thank you so much for your support of short-term missions. As we record this, it's May of 2025, and in the next few weeks, Johnny, there are going to be lots of folks going out in short-term missions. Can you imagine for a moment now, you're in a setting where there's a whole bunch of these teams gathered together. The team members are there, the team leaders are there, and you have a chance to address them. What would you like to say to that group?
To that group, I would encourage them to consider beforehand that they are going to a new context. They're going to a place that maybe they've never been before, to a new culture where things will not be the same as they are at home. And there will be people there who are faithfully ministering. Ask them questions. Ask them what is appropriate to do. What is the proper way to behave here? Learn from them. Because when you learn from the people who have been there for a long time, that's when you can really be effective in ministry, and not just bumbling along. But when you add wisdom and thoughtfulness to your experience, it'll just be made all the better. So reach out to the people beforehand if you can. Get to know them while you're there, because they're there for the long term, and you can really learn from them.
Johnny, sometimes our listeners would like to follow up on a topic. If they'd like to reach out and ask something of you, how could they do that?
Yeah, you could email me at johnny.peebles@gemission.org, and I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you. We'll make sure that Johnny's email address is in the show notes as well. And just want to thank you, Johnny, for the time spent in unpacking some of these ideas, sharing the testimony of God's ongoing work in a few places in Europe. Are you going to be leading teams in the next few weeks?
That's right. Yeah, I have a team to Athens.
You mentioned Greece. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, to Athens, Greece. That's a refugee ministry team in Athens. So I'm very excited about that one.
Well, may the Lord bless you and guide you through this summertime, Johnny, and bring out of it beautiful fruit that is lasting and pleasing to Him. And thanks so much for being with us on the Global Missions Podcast.
Thank you, Max. It's been really fun. Thanks.
Well, friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Global Missions Podcast. As we mentioned before, we invite you to subscribe on your favorite platform or on YouTube. We're increasingly doing the video recordings as well, and you can find us on Instagram. We want to invite you to visit the website of the Global Missions Toolbox, who has produced this podcast. There you will find a library of curated resources, especially for senders. And we're constantly tweaking this website as well. If you have ideas about how it might serve you better, our team would be delighted to hear from you. Our goal is that you have a trusted place to find great stuff, and you can find what you need quickly and efficiently. We would always be glad to hear your ideas on how it works and even the content that you find there. We invite you to join us again in 2 weeks when we will conclude this mini-series of 4 episodes on short-term missions. Then we'll have a short break over the summer and resume new episodes in September. We've already begun the planning and the preparation for those recordings. It's all underway behind the scenes with our team. We're looking forward to launching that early in September. Join us again in 2 weeks and we'll continue to explore this grand adventure of being Christ's witnesses to the ends of the earth.